Sure. Have you sent the slides to us or okay? Sure. Yes, we can see it clearly.
First of all, thank you, Ibu. So first of all, I understand the theme today is rapport logistique turun saat pelabuhan di Indonesia 20 besar terbaik dunia. So in this presentation, I will explain how to read the latest LPI report. What we can compare apple to apple, not apple to durian, and how to support logistics performance in Indonesia. So please go back to slide 2, the agenda. Thank you, Bapak Ibu. First, we'll introduce the changes in the LPI, explain what to expect from the LPI and what not to expect from the LPI. So you will see that 2 and 3 will be descriptive, and then we move to the global context and to the recommendations. Next, please. So next, please. The LPI survey, basically, the LPI, as you all know, when we talk about score, we talk about ranking, is based on a survey, which you see here on the left side. This is a perception survey. And this is done based on logistics professionals participating from about 113 countries. And the total of the LPI survey is about 4,000 country assessments. And so this is where we get the score. So it is the score, and the ranking is a perception score. And later I will explain what are the questions that are used to collect this data. And the second track, which is new, it is the first time that we publish it under the LPI headlines, is about new indicators based on actual supply chain tracking data. Next, please. So what is the role of the LPI? The LPI is not about finding out what are the exact problems. The LPI is like you go into the doctor, you have fever, and that's our LPI score. It shows there is fever. It does not show what is behind it. Next, please. So when we get to the tracking, the actual data, supply chain tracking data, our World Bank team in Washington went into agreement with different data owners to bring you this latest information. Next. Next, please. So the LPI survey reveals that the perception of Indonesia witnessed a slight decrease in the score between sorry, please go back. Thank you. So there is a slight decrease in the score of the LPI, and which is not statistically significant. Later on, you can ask him the question why it's not statistically significant. And if you can see, basically the trend between 2010 and 2022, it is on the upward trend. And for those who don't know, Indonesia is in the top 5 of lower middle income countries. Next, please. So let's look at the score. Let's look at what makes the score. So to calculate there are 6 indicators. And to calculate each indicator, there is actually one question. And I will share with you the question. So to understand what is the perception of logistics professionals about the efficiency of customs and other border agencies' processes, the question is, rate the efficiency of the clearance process by border control agency. And the answers are very low to very high. the question on the quality of trade and transport infrastructure is about evaluate the quality of trade and transport related infrastructure, and the options are very low to very high. The question about the competitiveness of the prices. Rate is of arranging competitively priced shipments. Option very difficult to very easy. About competency of logistics service providers. Evaluate the overall level of competence. Options very low to very high. And finally, ability to track and trace your consignment when shipping to Indonesia. Options very low to very high. And then when arranging a shipment to the countries listed below, so in this case, Indonesia, how often do they reach consignee within the scheduled or expected delivery time? Hardly ever to nearly always. So if you can hear me, Bapa, then Ibu, this is a qualitative survey as Pa Sesmenko mentioned earlier. So this is about the perception. It's like your customer satisfaction survey, if you want something more concrete. And therefore, this is about logistics professionals outside of Indonesia sharing their experience when they ship to Indonesia. Now, next, please. So when I mentioned, let's not compare apple to durian, let's compare apple to apple. We compare hard data. The data that was referred to by excellencies during this webinar has been based on the UNCTAD data. And so this you could use the new supply chain tracking indicators to compare Indonesia findings, with UNCTAD and other sources. And so when we look at the hard data, Indonesia is competitive in relation to the speed of trade, except for postal shipments. And if we want to look at the ports, which I understand this is one of the key themes or focus areas in this webinar, we can see that the ship turnaround time is under 2 days, although higher than ASEAN comparators, but it's still within the best practices. If we look at the import and export dwelling time, they are among the lowest in the region. If we look at the aviation import dwelling time, then as you can see, it's competitive with Philippines and Vietnam. And the postal dwelling time is, which is off the chart here. Next, please. So when we consider Indonesia, the perception of logistics professionals outside of Indonesia, what was happening in the world? What may have affected this decrease in the perception? If we look at the global context, the COVID-19 has led to major disruptions in international transportation. As we all know, we had extremely high costs, long transit time, and complete uncertainty. As many importers and exporters may remember, there were times when it was difficult to find an empty container or to find space on a container ship. We heard so many sailing cancellations, which also known as black sailing. At the time in 2021, I looked at some of the data we had, and international maritime shipping rates had increased between 100% and 500%. Ocean freight costs from Jakarta to the USA had increased 5 times, reaching about $18,000, $20,000 for a 40-footer. Intra-Asia freight rates also went 5 times. So this is just to put you back, in the context. And as you know, the prices were still high and uncertainty was still there until the last quarter of 2022. And actually, the survey, the perception survey, was done between September and November 2022. And at the World Bank Indonesia, we assume that the perception from logistics professionals that have been dealing with Indonesia during the time before September 2022, then they have suffered. And therefore, this is when we see the perception decrease. And the effect of the reduction of global demand, anyway, we expect that there will be reduction in capacity by shipping lines that you all see already. And there are risks in the future that there will be, again, some uncertainties in terms of space and on the vessels. Next, please. Now the way forward. So first of all, before I go into some guidance, I would like to highlight again what Pamenko Marves and Pasesmenko have mentioned already about the LPI results framework. That on the left side, we have areas that depend on policymakers and which are customs and other border agencies, infrastructure and service quality. And on the right side, those that depend both on private sector and policymakers, which is about the timeliness, international shipments, and tracking and tracing. And first, let me remind you, please, that the LPI is based on perception. So the LPI score and ranking that we talk about is about the perception. Logistics professionals outside of Indonesia are asked to answer 6 questions, and each question allows to give the score. Answers are from very low to very high, very difficult to very easy, hardly ever to nearly always. And now, why the perception shows decline? It could be due to various reasons. The LPI only allows to indicate a problem, not the reason behind it. So this was as a general reminder, and then let's move on, please, to the next. Next, please. Bapak Ibu, ya, terima kasih. So, analytical work by the World Bank highlights that there are several complementary reform areas. And these include some of the reforms that Pamenko Marves mentioned, for example, digitalization, and those that were mentioned by Bapak Sesmo, Bidang Perekonomian. In general, there are let's say 3 categories. Here in the slide, there are 4. But let's say in general, to speed up and move forward to the discussion. One is to improve at the border and behind the border processes through business process simplification and implementation of integrated single risk management. The national logistics ecosystem has a big role to play in this first component. Second, address binding constraints to domestic logistics, including trade and transport infrastructure. And third, and finally, improve the quality and competency of logistics service providers by simplifying the regulatory framework and enabling entry and development of skilled professionals in logistics. More broadly, areas of improvements need joint public-private partnerships in order to improve performance on timeliness, tracking and tracing, and ease of arranging competitively priced shipments. So these are the general guidances to improve logistics performance for the cross-border and domestic in Indonesia. So now please, next. So the previous slide on the inputs is about where the policymakers can play a big role. So this was the left side that we showed earlier on the slide, where the policymaker have the big role. But then the second is about collecting the data. I don't see the slide moving. Is it my internet? Yeah, this one. Terima kasih. So what we need now is about to track the outputs of regulations to improve policy, to track real data. Let's measure the right logistics indicators over time. And we can compare apple to apple. So thanks to micro-level data that could be collected systematically through the national logistics ecosystem, data can be collected, it will be collected in real time and reviewed over time. And this will help the policymakers identify the bottlenecks. So this will be data owned by Indonesia, and that could help at different levels policymakers understand the bottlenecks and act on it. And as we could see, in the past, thanks to the national single window dashboard, if we all, for those who know about this, the national single window dashboard, the dwelling time dashboard helped identify one of the bottlenecks in the import clearance, which was about the sequential inspections, quarantine, and then customs, and which led to the big reform on the joint customs quarantine inspection. So we have already seen the results of collecting good data, hard data, analyzing it, finding the bottlenecks, and reforming. Therefore, we strongly encourage to continue in this direction. And then, of course, in addition to micro data collected inside Indonesia, within Indonesia, then there is the other international data provided, like the one you mentioned on UNCTAD, or the latest World Bank report on the Container Performance Index. Yes, so for my side, that's it. Terima kasih banyak.
Okay, is that all? Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Lamia. Kita berikan tepuk tangan dulu untuk Ibu Lamia Benis dari The World Bank Indonesia berkaitan dengan survei LPI ya, yang menempatkan Indonesia di